They scanned Earth's air, then declared it uninhabitable. But Martha's defiance reached its peak as GIPA officials descended to enforce their cleansing protocol. Standing in Maple Hollow's town square, Trelk dramatically removed his suit and breathed Earth's air freely, offering his superior an apple fritter as proof of adaptability, a simple pastry that ultimately saved a planet. The high-ceilinged command chamber of the Galactic Environmental Protection Agency hummed with activity. Dozens of alien inspectors hunched over holographic displays, their multi-jointed appendages dancing through projected data streams as they analyzed sector reports from across the known universe. Overhead, the agency's banner stretched proudly. Clean environments equal galactic harmony. Commander Trelk of the Faltra species adjusted his atmosphere suit, his green skin faintly visible through the transparent faceplate. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he reviewed the latest readings from his sector. "Scanning complete for Sol 3, he announced to no one in particular, his voice crisp and official. "Classification pending final analysis." Across his view screen, numbers flickered. Oxygen-nitrogen ratios, carbon compound distributions, particulate densities, all categorized, quantified, and assigned risk values per GIPA Regulation Manual Section 774B. 300 miles below, Martha Green flipped the closed sign to open at precisely 5 a.m. The Leaf and Bean Cafe had been her life for 30 years, and she took pride in being first to welcome the morning in Maple Hollow. The small, Midwestern town was still dark, though the eastern sky had begun to lighten with promises of dawn. "Morning, Earl." "Morning, Frank," she called as the cafe's first customers shuffled in. The 2 elderly men had worked the factory line together for 40 years before retirement, and now they were the unofficial timekeepers of Maple Hollow. If Earl and Frank were at Leaf and Bean, the day had officially begun. "Got the Starstruck special today," Martha said, already pouring their coffee. 3 eggs, bacon, and coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. "Wouldn't miss it," Earl grunted, settling into his usual booth. Martha tied her apron, tucking a strand of silver-streaked brown hair behind her ear. At 58, she had the energy of someone decades younger and a face that crinkled pleasantly when she smiled. The cafe walls were lined with photos of Maple Hollow residents, newspaper clippings, and children's drawings, a 3-decade archive of small-town life. As she worked, Martha watched the town wake through the cafe windows. Farmers' trucks rolled toward the weekly market. Parents walked children to school. Sheriff Arlo Jenkins parked his cruiser across the street and gave her a friendly wave as he began his morning patrol. She didn't notice the metallic egg-shaped object that had begun slowly descending from the sky. In GIPA headquarters, Commander Trelk's console suddenly flashed red. "Alarm! Atmosphere uninhabitable," the readout proclaimed. Sub-readings flickered beneath. O2-O3 ratio off by plus 23%. Nitrogen compounds exceeding standard by 5 parts per million. Undocumented biological particulates. Trelk's upper eyes widened, while his lower pair narrowed, the faltrous expression of serious concern. He rechecked the readings, input the verification code, and watched as his system automatically generated the formal declaration. Sol 3 Earth, Category F Unlivable. A hovering assistant drone chimed. Category F declaration activates GEPA Protocol 88J. Full atmospheric cleansing within 72 hours, unless anthropological variance request filed. Trelk's finger hovered over the submission button. Such declarations weren't made lightly. Cleansing meant exactly what it sounded like. But the readings were clear, and GIPA regulations were absolute. Before he could submit, his console pinged with an incoming transmission. "Commander Trelk," came the stern voice of Chief Inspector Doramzar. The superior Faltris officer's face filled the view screen. All 4 of his eyes narrowed. "We've detected your Category F declaration in the approval queue." "Yes, sir. The atmospheric readings for Sol 3 exceed—" "We are aware of the readings," interrupted Counselor Zalke. her violet-tinged face appearing alongside Dormzar's. However, given the strategic importance of this sector, additional verification is required. You will conduct an on-site authentication immediately. Trelk's antennae quivered in protest. With respect, Counselor, the regulations state. The regulations also state that inhabited worlds require ground verification. Dormzar cut in. Descend to the surface and authenticate your findings. Scan for sentient adaptations to the atmospheric anomalies. The screen went blank before Trelk could argue further. He sighed, a whistling sound through his breathing apparatus, and programmed coordinates for his scanner probe. In Maple Hollow's town square, Sheriff Arlo Jenkins was the first to notice the metallic object hovering 20 feet above the central gazebo. It resembled a chrome egg, with blinking blue and green lights pulsing along its surface. A small crowd had begun to gather, pointing upward with expressions ranging from curiosity to fear. "Folks, let's stay calm," Arlo called, ushering people back. His hand instinctively moved to his holster, though he doubted his service weapon would do much against whatever this was. The object rotated slowly, then projected a beam of light that swept across the gathering crowd. A mechanical voice boomed. "Attention, Maple Hollow inhabitants. Your atmosphere is condemned." Panic erupted instantly. Parents grabbed children and ran. Store owners slammed their doors. A young boy dropped his bicycle, leaving it spinning wheels up on the sidewalk as he fled. Sheriff Arlo stood his ground, though his face had paled considerably. "Your environment has been classified Category F unlivable by Galactic Environmental Protection Agency, Statute 774B. Cleansing procedures will commence in 72 hours. Martha had just delivered plates of eggs to a table when she heard the commotion. Through the cafe window, she watched as people scattered from the square. Her first thought was for her grandchildren at the school 3 blocks away. The scanner probe continued. "Inspector will arrive for final verification. Prepare for atmospheric remediation." Sheriff Arlo was already on his radio, calling Mayor Linda Thompson. Martha set down her coffee pot with deliberate calm, untied her apron, and walked toward the door. "Martha, where are you going?" Earl called after her. "They're saying the air's poisoned or something." "That's exactly why I'm going," Martha replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Because I've been breathing this air for 58 years, and I'm still here." As she stepped outside, she saw Mayor Thompson's car speeding toward the town square, its emergency lights flashing. Linda Thompson had been mayor for 15 years, a practical woman with steel gray hair who wore pantsuits even to the annual Maple Hollow Festival. She wasn't one to panic. Martha intercepted her at the edge of the square. "Linda, what in heaven's name is going on?" "Your guess is as good as mine," the mayor replied, eyeing the hovering probe. "But I've called an emergency town meeting at the community center. Whatever this is, we're facing it together." Sheriff Arlo joined them, his usual unflappable demeanor strained. "It's saying our air is condemned, that they're going to cleanse it in 3 days. Martha looked between them, then at the strange device hovering above their town. "Well, then we'd better convince them otherwise." The town meeting that evening was standing room only. The community center, normally used for bingo nights and children's basketball games, buzzed with frightened voices. Mayor Thompson stood at the podium, trying to maintain order. "Please, everyone, we need to stay calm and think clearly." "How can we stay calm?" shouted Harold Wilson from the back. "They're saying our air is poison. My wife has asthma. Should we evacuate?" "Evacuate to where?" someone else called. "They said the whole planet." Martha sat in the front row, watching the panic spread like ripples in a pond. She'd closed the cafe early, checked on her grandchildren at her daughter's home, and come straight to the meeting. Next to her, Sheriff Arlo scribbled notes on a small pad. "Sheriff Jenkins and I have been in contact with state authorities," Mayor Thompson continued. "They're reporting similar visitations in towns across the country. The federal government is attempting to establish communication with the agency involved." Martha raised her hand. When the mayor nodded to her, she stood. Linda, I've been thinking. This inspector they mentioned. When do they arrive? The hovering probe had continued broadcasting periodic announcements throughout the day. Sheriff Arlo consulted his notes. It said the inspector would conduct ground verification, starting tomorrow at 800 hours. Martha nodded. Then that's our chance. Whoever this inspector is, they need to see that we're alive and well, that we've been breathing this air for generations. And how do we do that? Mayor Thompson asked. Martha looked around the room at her neighbors, people she'd served coffee and pie to for decades. We show them Maple Hollow, every bit of it, every person, every farm, every business. We prove our air supports life. By the next morning, word had spread throughout town. Martha opened the cafe at its usual time, though she suspected the alien inspector wouldn't care much for coffee and eggs. Still, hospitality was hospitality, regardless of species. At precisely 8 a.m., a sleek, silver craft descended from the clouds, landing delicately in the town square. The gathered crowd maintained a respectful distance, with Sheriff Arlo and Mayor Thompson at the front. Martha stood nearby, wiping her hands nervously on her apron. The craft's door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a tall, green-skinned figure in an elaborate environmental suit. 4 eyes blinked from behind a transparent faceplate as Commander Trellick stepped onto Earth soil for the first time. He carried what looked like a metal rod with blinking sensors, and his helmet was adorned with additional scanning equipment. Each step was deliberate, cautious, as though he expected the ground itself to be contaminated. Greetings. Mayor Thompson stepped forward, her voice remarkably steady. I'm Linda Thompson, Mayor of Maple Hollow. We understand you're here to verify something about our atmosphere. Trellick's response came through an external speaker on his suit. I am Commander Trellick, environmental scanner for Sector 7G. Your planet's atmosphere has been classified Category F unlivable. I am here to verify before cleansing procedures commence. Cleansing? Sheriff Arlo echoed. You mean getting rid of our air? How exactly are we supposed to breathe? Atmospheric remediation is not concerned with indigenous adaptation. Trellick replied, matter-of-factly. GEPA guidelines are clear. Environments that exceed toxicity thresholds must be neutralized and reconstructed. Martha pushed forward. Now, hold on just a minute. I'm Martha Green. I've been running the Leaf and Bean Cafe over there for 30 years, just like my mother did for 30 before that. We've been breathing this air for generations. Your readings must be wrong. Trellick's 4 eyes blinked in what might have been surprise. He held up a small tablet-like device that projected a holographic display. GEPA Regulation 42.3b clearly states, any planetary atmosphere deviating by more than 10% from the prescribed ratios is fatal to faltrous life forms and must be remediated. But we're not foul, whatever you called it, Martha pointed out. We're humans, and we're doing just fine. Anthropic variance would require 48 hours of ground validation, Trellick replied, sounding doubtful. I must collect samples from multiple locations and verify indigenous adaptive mechanisms. Sheriff Arlo stepped forward. Then let us show you around. Give us 24 hours to prove humans live and breathe here just fine. You can take all the samples you want. Trellick consulted his tablet. Section 118.7c does permit variance investigation through in situ observation. After a moment's consideration, his antennae wiggled slightly. I will allow this demonstration. 24 Earth hours. Martha smiled. Wonderful. Let's start with breakfast. Trellick's tour of Maple Hollow began at Martha's cafe, though the alien inspector declined her offer of coffee, explaining that his suit filtered all external substances. Instead, he scanned everything, the griddle, the coffee pot, even the maple syrup, recording readings on his tablet with occasional mutters about hydrocarbon particulates and thermal degradation compounds. The real education began when Martha took him to Green Valley Farms on the outskirts of town. Farmers were harvesting late summer tomatoes and tending to beehives that buzzed with activity. These plants convert carbon dioxide to oxygen through photosynthesis, Martha explained, picking a ripe tomato and biting into it. And we eat them. Circle of life. Trelk scanned the tomato, then the soil, then the air around the greenhouse. These pesticide residues, chlorozine levels exceed Faltris tolerance by 400%, he noted with alarm. Hasn't bothered us yet, said Farmer Wilson with a shrug, popping a cherry tomato into his mouth. Their next stop was Ortega's auto shop, where James Ortega was replacing a spark plug in an ancient pickup truck. The garage smelled of oil, gasoline, and the particular scent of metal that's been heated and cooled repeatedly. James has been fixing engines for 40 years, Martha said proudly. Trelk's scanner beeped frantically near the truck's exhaust pipe. Hydrocarbon particulates exceed 12 BPM, he announced. In Faltris environments, this would cause immediate respiratory failure. James wiped his hands on a rag. Well, gives me a cough sometimes, but nothing a beer can't fix. By mid-morning, they'd reached Maple Primary School, where children were playing dodgeball in the gymnasium and creating watercolor paintings in art class. Trelk's scanner went wild at the art supplies. VOC levels in these paint fumes are hazardous, he declared. They're non-toxic, explained the art teacher. Safe for children. Safe for human children, Trelk corrected, making another note. Outside, the soccer team was practicing under the late morning sun. Children ran back and forth across the field, their faces red with exertion, sweat darkening their uniforms. Excessive sweat gland secretion, Trelk noted, creating high salinity atmospheric humidity. That's how we cool off, Martha explained. Perfectly normal. For lunch, Martha brought Trelk to Sweet Crumb Bakery, run by her neighbor Sarah Benson. The shop smelled of cinnamon, vanilla, and caramelized sugar. You have to try an apple fritter, Sarah insisted, offering a plate to Trelk. Best in the county. Trelk hesitated, then extended a sampling tube from his suit. The tube extracted a small piece of the pastry and drew it inside his helmet for analysis. Sugar and carbohydrate levels would cause metabolic spikes inconsistent with known Faltris physis, he observed. But is it good? Sarah pressed, smiling. Trelk paused before answering. It is. Interesting. My suit indicates it contains nutrients, though in combinations unusual to my species. Martha counted this as progress. By afternoon, Trelk had scanned the water treatment plant, the community garden, and the local playground. Everywhere, his instruments registered what he called anomalies, conditions that should be fatal, but obviously weren't to the thriving human population. As the sun began to set, Martha suggested one final stop. My father taught me to fish on Lake Maple when I was 6 years old, she said, leading Trelk to a small wooden dock. I still come here when I need to think. The lake was calm, reflecting the orange and purple sky. Martha handed Trelk a fishing rod, which he examined with all 4 eyes. The purpose, he asked. Patience, peace, and if we're lucky, dinner, Martha replied, casting her line. Trelk awkwardly mimicked her motion, sending his line splashing into the water. His scanner analyzed the lake surface. Trace algae blooms, nitrogen runoff from agricultural activities. Yet fish still live here, he observed, watching ripples where fish broke the surface. Life finds a way, Martha said simply. They sat in companionable silence as the stars began to appear. When Martha caught a small bass, she showed Trelk how to clean it, then cooked it over a small fire by the shore. You should try a bite, she suggested, offering him a piece. Again, Trelk extended his sampling tube. After analysis, he noted, protein glycoproteins unfamiliar to Faltris physiology. Then, more quietly, he added, yet I feel, hunger satisfied. As night fell completely, Martha noticed Trellick sitting alone by the dying embers of their fire. His helmet lights flickered as he reviewed the day's readings. She could hear him recording a log entry. Cognitive dissonance detected. Instrument readings indicate fatal atmosphere, yet indigenous life thrives. Must complete 24-hour observation. Martha smiled to herself. Progress indeed. For their final stop, Martha suggested showing Trellick adult human recreation. She led him to the Rusty Lantern, Maple Hollow's only dive bar. The establishment pulsed with neon lights, country music, and the clack of pool balls. People come here to relax, socialize, and sometimes make questionable decisions, Martha explained as they entered. Trellick's sensors went haywire immediately. Cigarette smoke, alcohol fumes, and the particular musk of humans who'd been dancing, all registered as atmospheric contaminants. At the bar, Martha greeted several regulars and introduced Trellick as a visitor studying our town. Most patrons were too focused on their drinks to pay much attention to the strange green being in the environmental suit. That changed when Hank Withers stumbled in from the back room. Hank had been Maple Hollow's resident troublemaker since high school, and 3 decades of hard drinking hadn't improved his disposition. "What the hell is that?" he slurred, pointing at Trellick. "Some kind of new health inspector?" "Just a visitor, Hank," Martha said firmly. "Leave him be." But Hank was already advancing, peering at Trellick's scanning rod. "That's one of them devices that shut down McCreary's restaurant last year, ain't it? Saying his kitchen wasn't up to code?" "This is an intergalactic multispectral analyzer," Trellick corrected. "It measures atmospheric—" "I knew it!" Hank lunged for the scanner. "You ain't shutting down the lantern! We like it dirty!" Sheriff Arlo, who'd been quietly nursing a soda at the end of the bar, moved to intervene, but he was too late. In the ensuing scuffle, Hank grabbed a beer bottle and swung wildly. The bottle shattered against Trellick's helmet, cracking the faceplate. The bar fell silent. Trellick froze, his 4 eyes widening in what was clearly terror. The crack in his helmet meant exposure to raw earth air, something his readings had insisted was fatal. He held his breath, waiting for collapse, for the burning of toxins, for the end. Instead, nothing happened. Cautiously, Trellick took a small breath, then another. The bar remained utterly silent as the alien inspector slowly, deliberately removed his damaged helmet, revealing a face with green skin, 4 blinking eyes, and delicate antennae that quivered in the open air. Trellick took a deep, full breath of unfiltered Earth atmosphere. Then, to everyone's surprise, he made a pleased trilling sound, something between a purr and a chirp. The bar erupted in cheers and applause. Someone slapped Trellick on the back. Another patron offered him a beer, which he cautiously sampled through his suit's tube. Martha smiled. "Welcome to Earth Air," she said quietly. "First breath's free." The celebration at the Rusty Lantern lasted well into the night. Even Hank Withers, after being firmly spoken to by Sheriff Arlo, offered a gruff apology to Trellick for breaking his helmet. By the time Martha walked the alien inspector back to his craft in the town square, he was moving with notably less rigidity, his antennae swaying gently in the night breeze. "Your documentation was correct," Trellick admitted. "Humans have clearly adapted to this atmospheric composition. I must file a variance report immediately." "Thank you," Martha said. "We're rather fond of our air, you know." "I am beginning to understand why," Trellick replied, his voice sounding different without the helmet, more melodic, with subtle tonal shifts. Before he could enter his craft, however, the night sky suddenly blazed with light. A massive ship, at least 10 times the size of Trellick's small vessel, descended from the clouds. It hovered above Maple Hollow, its hull gleaming with what looked like weapons arrays and scanning equipment. "No," Trellick whispered, his antennae drooping. "It's too soon." A beam of light shot down from the larger ship, and 3 figures materialized in the town square. They wore environmental suits, similar to Trellick's, but more elaborate, with insignia and decorations that suggested higher rank. "Commander Trellick," boomed the tallest figure. "Why have you not submitted your verification report?" Trellick straightened, addressing the newcomers with formal gestures. "Chief Inspector Doramzar, Counselor Zalkay, Commander Vextrun, I was preparing my findings. The situation requires careful documentation. We have reviewed your preliminary scans," said Doramzar. "They confirm our orbital assessment. Category F is verified." "We proceed with atmospheric remediation," added Zalkay. "No further delay." By now, lights were coming on throughout Maple Hollow as residents awoke to the commotion. Mayor Thompson arrived, hastily dressed in a pantsuit over pajamas. Sheriff Arlo was close behind. Martha stepped forward. "Now, hold on just a minute. According to your own officer here, we've been conducting official tests all day, and he's breathing our air right now, as you can see." The three GIPA officials turned their attention to Trellick, noting with apparent shock his missing helmet. "Explain yourself, Commander," Doramzar demanded. Trellick stood straighter. "Sir, I have discovered an anthropological variance. The human species has adapted to this atmospheric composition, according to GIPA Regulation 773B. Article 2. You must consider evidence of sentient life adaptation." "Preposterous," scoffed Commander Vextrun. "Our readings are clear." "Then explain this," Trellick challenged, removing his gloves to feel the night air directly on his green skin. "I have been breathing unfiltered Earth atmosphere for hours without adverse effects." Martha seized the moment. "If your own officer can breathe our air, surely that proves it's not as dangerous as your instruments claim." Doramzar consulted his hollow tablet, scrolling through regulations with a frown. Regulation 42.3a does state that any environmental remediation order must be suspended if incontrovertible evidence arises, contradicting initial findings. "A single anomalous reaction is hardly incontrovertible," countered Zalkay. "The Neo-Argent Consortium has already secured mining rights pending remediation. Economic interests and galactic reserves outweigh local anomalies." Martha exchanged a glance with Mayor Thompson. Mining rights? This was the first mention of any economic motivation behind the cleansing. "Now, just a minute," Mayor Thompson interjected. "This isn't about our atmosphere at all, is it? This is about mining our planet. The resource potential of Sol 3 is irrelevant to this discussion," Zalkay said smoothly. "GIPA protocols are concerned only with environmental standards." The standoff might have continued. But at that moment, sirens blared from above. Looking up, Martha saw two sleek black vessels descending rapidly toward the square. Vessels unlike anything she'd seen before, with angular hulls and what looked unmistakably like weapons. "Terraforming vessels," Trellick whispered to Martha. "Black market. They'll strip the atmosphere and replace it with Faltris standard gases." Before the vessels could land, however, a new set of lights appeared in the sky. Three massive ships with Earth Defense Force, emblazoned on their hulls, took position above Maple Hollow. A stern voice boomed from the lead ship. "This is Admiral Naomi Lin of the Earth Space Defense Force. Under Earth Sovereign Act 42.8.2, Maple Hollow and all human settlements hold priority rights. We protest any unauthorized atmospheric alteration actions." A woman in a crisp uniform descended from the lead ship, flanked by officers with sidearms. Admiral Lin approached the GIPA officials with confident strides. "We've been monitoring your activities," she informed them. "Earth has treaties with 17 galactic nations, all of which recognize our atmospheric sovereignty. GIPA has universal jurisdiction over environmental hazards," Doramzar countered, though he sounded less certain. "Then, perhaps," Martha suggested, stepping forward, "you should be absolutely certain it's actually a hazard." She turned to Trellick. "Show them what you've learned. Show them what you can do now." In front of his superiors, Trellick deliberately removed his entire environmental suit, standing in the town square in just his simple Faltris undergarment. From his pocket, he produced a slightly squashed apple fritter from Sarah's bakery earlier that day. Sensorium confirms palatable, he announced, taking a bite. Nutritional assimilation optimal. He held out the remaining piece to Dorumzar. Taste for yourself, Chief Inspector. Dorumzar stared at the offered pastry, then at Trelk breathing freely, then at his hollow tablet. After a long moment, he sighed, a whistling sound through his helmet. Regulation 42.3A is clear, he admitted. In light of apparent adaptive capacity, remediation must be suspended pending further study. The Neo-Argent Consortium will not be pleased, Zalke muttered. Perhaps the consortium should find planets without sentient life to mine, Admiral Lin suggested pointedly. The crowd that had gathered in the square burst into cheers. Martha hugged Trellick impulsively, surprising him and herself. Mayor Thompson stepped forward to formally address the GIPA officials. We welcome a proper scientific assessment of our atmosphere, she said diplomatically. Maple Hollow would be honored to host your research team. A fact-finding commission will be established, Dorumzar declared, trying to maintain some dignity. Commander Trelk will serve as liaison, given his unique adaptation. As the terraforming vessels retreated and the GIPA officials returned to their ship to make arrangements, Martha found herself standing with Sheriff Arlo, watching the dawn break over Maple Hollow. If you hadn't shown him our town, Arlo said quietly, we'd be evacuating by now. Martha smiled. Sometimes you just have to show people who you are. Numbers and readings can't tell the whole story. Arlo's hand brushed against hers. Brief, tentative, but deliberate. You're pretty remarkable, Martha Green. In the weeks that followed, Maple Hollow became home to dozens of Faltris scientists in white lab coats. They set up scanning equipment throughout town, in the cafe, on farms, at the school, by the lake. Residents gradually grew accustomed to green-skinned, four-eyed aliens sampling their food, analyzing their activities, and asking endless questions about human physiology. Trellick had been officially assigned as chief liaison between GIPA and Earth authorities. He'd taken to wearing a modified suit that left his head exposed to Earth air, a compromise that seemed to symbolize his position between two worlds. One evening, Martha found him standing alone in Maple Park, beneath a grove of the town's namesake trees. He was recording observations in his log. How's the research going? She asked, offering him a cup of coffee, black, the way he'd come to prefer it. Fascinating, Trelk replied, accepting the cup. Human adaptive capacity exceeds anything in GIPA's database. Your species thrives in conditions that should be toxic. We're stubborn that way, Martha smiled. It is more than stubbornness. It is. Trelk searched for the word. Resilience. An admirable trait. Martha sat beside him on a park bench. I was wondering, those mining rights Zalke mentioned, was that the real reason GIPA wanted to cleanse our atmosphere? Trelk's antennae drooped slightly. I fear corruption exists even in GIPA. The Neo-Argent Consortium has significant influence. Yesterday, one of their operatives approached me, a human named Merrick Fenn. What did he want? He offered me advancement, privileges, access to Faltris inner circles, if I would reverse my findings and support the original cleansing order. Trelk's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. He said no one would miss one insignificant town. What did you tell him? Trelk made the trilling sound that Martha now recognized as laughter. I offered him an apple fritter and suggested he breathe deeply of Maple Hollow's air. As they shared a moment of quiet amusement, an elderly Faltris in elaborate robes approached them. His green skin had a faint, bluish tinge that Martha had learned indicated advanced age. Commander Trelk, the elder Faltris said formally. Trelk stood immediately. Archon Svarthun. This is Martha Green, the human who first demonstrated Earth's habitability. Svarthun inclined his head to Martha. Your reputation precedes you, Earth Dweller. Your methods are unorthodox, but effective. Sometimes the rules need bending, Martha suggested. Precisely the matter I wish to discuss with Commander Trellick, Svarthun replied. Your unorthodoxy threatens your standing among the Faltris. Commander, many believe you have been contaminated by Earth influences. Trellick's antennae stiffened. My findings are scientifically sound. Archon. Indeed. Which is why I have come to inform you that the Fact-Finding Commission is considering a formal revision of GIPA atmospheric protocols. Svarthun's voice held a note of what might have been respect. Your data suggests our strict numerical thresholds cannot capture the complexity of life. Martha hid a smile as Trellick's antennae quivered with excitement. Of course, Svarthun continued. Such revision would require extensive documentation. Perhaps a permanent research outpost? Maple Hollow would be honored, Martha said quickly, before Trellick could respond. We have plenty of room for a GIPA facility. Svarthun nodded sagely. I shall inform the Commission of your cooperation. As the elder Faltris departed, Trellick turned to Martha with all four eyes wide. Do you realize what this means? A permanent revision of GIPA standards, based on Maple Hollow's example. And a permanent place for you here, if you want it, Martha added. Trellick's antennae curled in what she'd come to recognize as his version of a smile. The following days saw Maple Hollow transform in unexpected ways. Sarah's Bakery became an unofficial cultural center as Faltris researchers discovered the joys of cinnamon rolls and blueberry muffins. The Sweet Crumb now featured a sign, Galactically Approved Pastries. Mayor Thompson and Sheriff Arlo organized Atmosphere Appreciation Day, where humans and Faltris scientists gathered in the park for picnics, games, and demonstrations of Earth technology. Several researchers showed particular interest in the town's old windmill, which continued functioning despite what they called ionized ozone readings. Even Hank Withers found a role in the new order, giving Faltris scientists tours of the Rusty Lantern and explaining the cultural significance of pool, darts, and karaoke, though Archon Svarthun declared the latter acoustically distressing to Faltris auditory systems. After 90 days of continuous monitoring, sampling, and cultural exchange, the GIPA Scientific Commission presented its findings in Maple Hollow's town square. Every resident attended, along with news crews from across the country and representatives from 17 nations. Chief Inspector Doram Zar, who had remained on Earth to oversee the commission, stood at a podium flanked by Councillor Zalke, Archon Svarthun, and Admiral Lin. The Galactic Environmental Protection Agency hereby revises its classification of Sol 3 Earth atmosphere, he announced formally. Previous designation, Category F Unlivable, is withdrawn. New classification, Category G Resilient Biosphere. Cheers erupted from the crowd. Doram Zar waited for silence before continuing. Furthermore, GIPA regulations will be updated to include adaptive faunal tolerance, cultural variance indices, and organic resilience parameters in all future assessments. He paused, then added, with what sounded like grudging respect, the Maple Hollow model will serve as the template for these revisions. Mayor Thompson accepted a ceremonial scroll from Doram Zar, then invited Martha to join her at the podium. Martha Green has been named Humanities Advocate by the GIPA Commission, the mayor announced proudly. Her efforts preserved not just our town, but potentially our entire atmosphere. Martha stepped to the microphone, suddenly self-conscious before the cameras and dignitaries. We're just a town that loves coffee, fishing, and apple fritters, she said simply. You taught us that science matters, but so do hearts and hands that care for the land. Archon Svarthun approached next, presenting Trellick with a medallion on an elaborate chain. Commander Trellick is awarded the Faltris Medal of Cultural Inquiry, our highest honor for scientific and diplomatic achievement. Trellick's antennae wiggled in shy gratitude as he accepted the medal. The ceremony concluded with an exchange of gifts. The Faltris scientists presented Maple Hollow with a tiny bioluminescent moss specimen from Borlax Prime that glowed with shifting colors, and a crystal of seeing that projected holographic images of distant star systems when exposed to moonlight. In return, Mayor Thompson presented the GIPA delegation with the deed to a small plot of land on the edge of town, designated for the first permanent GIPA outreach office on Earth. Together, she declared, we will ensure that future assessments include community input and recognize the remarkable adaptability of life. As official proceedings gave way to celebration, Martha found herself standing with Trellick near the refreshment table, watching as humans and Faltris cautiously attempted to teach each other their traditional dances. You've changed, she observed. When you first landed, you could barely look at us without checking your scanner. Trellick made his trilling laugh. Earth has been an education. Humans are inconsistent, messy, yet astonishingly resilient. He sipped his coffee. I have updated my personal atmospheric models accordingly. And what about your career? Won't staying on Earth affect your advancement in GIPA? Perhaps, Trellick admitted. But I find I prefer coffee to promotions. And the air here? It has a quality that cannot be measured by instruments. Their conversation was interrupted when Hank Withers approached, awkwardly carrying 2 plates of cake. He offered one to Trellick with a gruff nod. Figured I owe you, after breaking your helmet and all, he mumbled. Turns out you're all right, for a government inspector. And you are remarkably aggressive, for a cultural ambassador. Trellick replied with deadpan humor that made Martha choke on her punch. Hank grinned despite himself. Yeah, well, sorry about that. I thought you were just another inspector coming to shut us down. Turns out, you're one of us. Sort of. Trellick's antennae curled in pleasure. I consider that a compliment of the highest order. Hank Withers. As summer gave way to fall, life in Maple Hollow found a new rhythm. The GIPA Outreach Office opened with a staff of 6 Faltris researchers and 3 human scientists. Trellick, appointed as director, could often be found in the Leaf and Bean Cafe during his lunch breaks, discussing atmospheric particulates with Martha over apple fritters. Mayor Thompson and Sheriff Arlo had become unofficial ambassadors, traveling to neighboring towns to explain the Maple Hollow Protocol for interspecies cooperation. Their working relationship had evolved into something more personal, a development that delighted the town gossips and surprised no one who'd seen them together during the crisis. Sarah Benson's bakery now shipped special Faltris spice cakes across the country. Their recipe a carefully guarded secret that she claimed came to her in a dream about cinnamon and starlight. On a crisp October morning, Martha was wiping down counters after the breakfast rush when Admiral Lynn entered the cafe. The naval officer had become a regular visitor to Maple Hollow, overseeing Earth's expanding relationship with GIPA. Good morning, Admiral, Martha greeted her. Coffee? Please, Lynn replied, settling at the counter. Black as space. As Martha poured, the Admiral slid a hollow tablet across the counter. The Earth Council is proposing a joint Earth-GIPA summit next spring. They want to host it here. Martha raised an eyebrow. In Maple Hollow? We're hardly equipped for a planetary summit. That's exactly why they want it here, Lynn explained. This town has become a symbol of what's possible when different species look beyond their instruments and regulations. She smiled. Besides, I've heard the coffee is excellent. The bell above the door jingled as Trellick entered, no longer wearing any kind of environmental protection, just simple Faltris clothing adapted for Earth weather. He'd recently started experimenting with human-style hats and currently sported a plaid fishing cap that clashed spectacularly with his green skin. Good morning, Martha, Admiral. He nodded to them both. The new atmospheric timers have been calibrated. We can now measure Earth's seasonal variations with 99.7% accuracy. Martha caught his eye and smiled. Ready for the next adventure, then? Trellick adjusted his ridiculous hat and made the trilling sound that had become so familiar. Affirmative. And I've adjusted the oxygen timers. Earth autumn contains 2.4% more pollen particulates than summer. Fascinating. Martha laughed and poured him a cup of coffee. Beyond the cafe windows, maple leaves were turning brilliant red and gold. A Faltris researcher walked past, deep in conversation with Farmer Wilson about crop rotation. In the town square, a class of elementary school children were helping install a new sign. Maple Hollow, Galactic Headquarters for Adaptive Atmosphere Studies. Come breathe the difference. Martha raised her own coffee cup in a small, private toast to breathing the difference, indeed. 6 months later, Maple Hollow had become a bustling waypoint for interstellar tourists and researchers. The Leaf and Bean Cafe now advertised zero-gravity latte blasts, Faltris style, and Martha had hired 3 new servers just to keep up with demand. On a warm spring morning, she stood outside the cafe, watching as delegates arrived for the first Earth-GIPA summit. Vehicles of all descriptions lined Main Street, everything from government limousines to alien hover transports. Sheriff Arlo, now wearing a new uniform with interspecies liaison badges, directed traffic with good-natured efficiency. He caught Martha's eye and winked. Trelk approached, now sporting a formal Faltris diplomatic uniform with his Cultural Inquiry Medal prominently displayed. His antennae quivered with barely contained excitement. The Faltris High Council has approved permanent amendment to GIPA Regulation 42.3b, he announced. All atmospheres will now be evaluated on the Maple-Trelk scale of adaptive potential. The Maple-Trelk scale? Martha repeated, surprised and touched. I argued for Green Trelk, but was overruled, he admitted. Apparently, Maple communicates Earth origins more clearly to non-humans. Martha laughed. I'm honored either way. Archon Svarthun joined them, his ceremonial robes fluttering in the spring breeze. The Neo-Argent Consortium has withdrawn its mining petition, he informed them. Admiral Lin's suggestion of planets without sentient life was apparently persuasive. Or perhaps they realize that some things are more valuable than minerals, Martha suggested. Svarthun's antennae curled in amusement. Indeed. Though I must report that 17 other corporations have submitted applications to study Earth's adaptive commercial potential. Capitalism, it seems, is a universal constant. As summit delegates gathered in the expanded community center, Martha took a moment to appreciate how much had changed. A year ago, she'd been serving coffee and eggs to the same familiar faces every morning. Now, her small town had become a symbol of interstellar cooperation. Mayor Thompson, recently elected to a new position as Earth's representative to GIPA, approached with Admiral Lin. They're ready for you inside, Martha, the mayor said. The opening ceremony can't start without humanity's advocate. Martha straightened her best dress and nodded. As they walked toward the community center, she glanced up at the clear blue sky, the same sky that had once been condemned as uninhabitable. Remarkable atmospheric conditions today, Trelk commented, following her gaze. Oxygen-nitrogen balance optimal. Particulate count minimal. It's a beautiful day, Martha translated, smiling. That too, Trelk agreed, his antennae curling happily. Together, they entered the summit to discuss the future of Earth's relationship with the stars, one breath at a time.